Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Talkin podcast. I'm Nick Delahanty. The guy to my right is Jordan Foles. The big news in the sports world is that the New York Yankees acquired Juan Soto in a trade from the San Diego Padres, but we are not here to talk about that, even though I would love to. Yankee attires because I recorded a podcast right before this. So, you know what? It's a great day to be a Yankee fan. It's always a great day to be a heel. Jordan, how's it going?
Good, man. Doing good.
You're upset about the Soto trade, aren't you?
Look, as a Red Sox fan, I do not want to sit here and look at Yankee gear for 45 minutes. But the Turtles have a lot of positive. Just like that. That would be perfect. The Turtles
whole show.
Positive things to talk about. It's been a while since we last got together. A lot of busy stuff between Tennessee and then the weekend. And then you went to the Garden. So we didn't get a chance to record pre-UConn. So we got a lot to recap here in the last week.
Yeah, we definitely do. The Tar Heels took down Tennessee in the ACC-SEC Challenge, and then over the weekend took down Florida State. They did suffer a loss at the Garden to UConn, and we'll get into all of these games and more. And then we'll look at the women's side. The women played a tough game against South Carolina. They gave the Gamecocks their toughest test of the year so far.
Yeah, and now they entered that game as a 30-point underdog. It was really starting to circulate pregame on social media about how big of an underdog they were, and then they led that game for a majority of three quarters. And then South Carolina, obviously, just more talented there at the end, and they're really good for a reason. And they've won 2 national championships in the last 5 years, and North Carolina is still trying to get to that point, and that's a good challenge to see where you're at as a measuring stick. And I thought Courtney Bainhart's squad did a really good job, and they got their big test coming up this weekend with UConn.
Absolutely. And you know what? The biggest thing for both programs is they both had a measuring stick kind of game, like telling where they are. The men had it from UConn, the women had it from South Carolina. We'll go into both of those games a little bit deeper. But let's start on the men's side. Tennessee, I thought that the men put together a very strong performance against the Volunteers. Volunteers are a very good team. Dalton Connect, that guy is just a scorer. He ended up going for 37. He almost broke the school record for most points by an opposing player. If he didn't get hurt in that game, who knows how many points he would have had. He probably would have got close to 40. But you know what? If you're Carolina, you take that win. You scored a lot of points. You were efficient offensively. Yeah, there are some things you want to shore up, but you got to be satisfied with that victory.
Yeah, I think that first half was the best first half we've seen from Carolina, not just this year, but in quite some time, especially offensively. They put 61 points on the Volunteers in the first half, and Tennessee entered that game as the number 1 team in defense efficiency per KenPom. So it wasn't like they were doing this against UNC Greensboro. They did it against the best defense team in the country, and it ended up ultimately hanging 100 on them. 12 of 28 from 3. They were very efficient offensively. They made their free throws, 32 of 38. A lot of people, sometimes you look at the free throw discrepancy and you're like, oh, Carolina got a lot of calls. That's how Tennessee plays. They're very physical. And when you're that physical, you're going to get called for fouls. And Carolina took advantage of that by attacking the basket. The Smith Center was a great atmosphere for that game. And I thought Carolina did a really good job. And you knew Tennessee was going to make a run. It's hard to play with a 24-point lead as an offensive player of the team with the lead and to keep that energy. And I thought Carolina did a good job not letting it just crumble. And I know the players on this year's team said they don't want to talk about last year. As fans, we're still going to relate back to last year. It's recency bias. That's a game that last year's team might crumble and blow that 24-point lead. And I feel like they did a good job just battling through that Tennessee run and things like that, and ultimately holding on for that 8-point victory.
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head. I don't think anybody expected Tennessee to just fold in that game. You know, Carolina had a very strong first half, and they were really pushing the pedal, and they were going at it. Nobody expected Tennessee to just give up, and they had a strong push in the second half. I think they cut it to, single digits at one point.
They cut it to 7.
So they got to single digits, but Carolina did a really good job of keeping them at bay. You know, like you said, we're going to talk about last year's team and we're going to compare it, but there are so many things you could look at and just say this team is so much better in this aspect than that team, and that's one of them. They play to the final whistle. They have that intensity. You know, it was a good quality team. They're not going to just let you beat them by 30 points. That's not how Rick Barnes is a coach. And, that locker room talk at halftime, that they were pumped up to get back out there. You got to take that as a quality win for Hubert Davis's team, especially on the home court. Electric atmosphere. You played well. You had a phenomenal first half. A lot of good things to like about it.
Yeah, I think it got down to 7, and when you need a bucket, you go to RJ Davis, and we'll talk about RJ and how great he has been offensively. But he came down, he had 3 to push it back out to 10, and it kind of felt like every time Tennessee would get close, it was either RJ or Harrison were making a shot or making a play to stretch that lead back out to 12, 14. And that's just so key for this team, is being able to keep teams at bay. And even at losses, RJ hit some big shots against UConn and whatnot, and we'll get into that game. But overall, performance-wise, they kept their turnovers down, and they assisted them. They made 28 shots and had 19 assists. So I believe Elliot Cadeau, that was his 10 assist game in this stretch. And we've really seen it. We're really watching Cadeau grow up right in front of our eyes.
Yeah, let's talk about Cadeau for a minute, because that's a really good segue to him. Has the 10 assist game and doesn't turn the ball over. Starting to really feel like he's growing up before our eyes, like you said. He's staying out of foul trouble for the most part, knock on wood, because they're better when he's on the court. And the efficiency of the way he's moving the ball. We say it all the time. It's kind of like he's a play ahead. Now, are you concerned with the fact that Cadeau's not really willing to shoot the ball from deep? He's been a little hesitant. Is that something that concerns you? Because I heard it from a couple of people in the crowd at MSG. Some people seem to think that it is hampering the offense a little bit.
I don't think it's hampering. I think that it's something that he has to grow that confidence. And I think we saw that against Florida State a little bit, not necessarily from deep, but there was a really good piece on Inside Carolina. I think it was after the Florida State game. Or it was after Tennessee, I believe, where Cadeau talked about he's always been a pass-first guy. His parents even tried to bribe him to score when he was younger. He was going to get $5 for every point, and he still would just pass the ball. Like, you can go out and have a 20-point night and get $100 as a kid, and he's still over here just passing the basketball. And so I think that's just who he is. But I think against Florida State, we saw it there in the second half when Carolina went on that 22-0 run. There was like 2 or 3 drives where Cadeau just crossed over his man, went right to the basket, and was like, oh, I'm quicker than these guys. It's like it clicked for him, like, oh, I can get to the basket. And so I think that is just another growing point that we're seeing. We still have to remember, he's only 9 games into his career. He's supposed to be a high school senior. I think that's something that he'll grow up just another step along the way, that we'll see him start to develop that confidence of scoring. And it might not necessarily be from 3. It might be a mid-range jumper like RJ has, or driving to the basket. But in that second half against Florida State, you really saw it where he was like, I can get by these guys really easily. I'm faster than everybody. And so I think you'll see that more. The 3-point range doesn't necessarily concern me as much. I think the reason it stood out more against UConn was just because UConn was hitting threes at a high clip. And just UConn is so elite at what they do. And so you're like, oh, well, we need to be doing it on the other end. And when Cormac's 0-6 and Ingram didn't shoot well, and so when you combine all those factors, you're like, oh, man, it'd be really nice if RJ, or if Elliott was scoring too, or at least shooting. I think that was just a factor of UConn just playing really well and Carolina just having a bad shooting night.
Yeah, and you know what I said to the people in the crowd? I was not worried about Cadeau, because when he was getting the ball, he was making mostly the right plays. And he was driving to the basket. And like you said, kind of Florida State was like, oh, man, I'm faster than these guys. I could get to the lane. He was doing that against UConn, too. And UConn's got some pretty good guards that were guarding him, too. And let's not forget, a 7'2" big man waiting in the wings for you. He made some elite NBA type of moves at the basket to get the ball in. I'm not worried about Cadeau. I'm not. I think that he is a budding star. The scoring's going to come, but what he brings to the table with this team is the passing ability. And for me, the 3-point shooting's going to come. He's going to get that confidence. It's going to be that clicking, like, oh, man, I could shoot from here. I don't have to overthink it. Kind of like Seth Trimble last year. It kind of got a little hesitant to pull the trigger. He doesn't have to be hesitant. Go out and just play your game. And I think he's starting to learn that. So I'm not really concerned about that. But they go into Florida State. And coming off the Tennessee game, I would say that their first half was very lackluster. I feel like a Saturday afternoon in Chapel Hill, not the biggest game to get up for. The crowd even felt a little at first. But then Hubert Davis did what Hubert Davis has been doing of late. And he goes to the trap. And he goes to the full court press. And for some reason, this group responds when they play in the full court press. And that was a big turning point of that game.
Yeah, it was a very lackluster half, like you said. And I feel like that Florida State game, again, as fans, we're going to relate to last year. It's what we're going to do because that's what we have to compare it to. And with RJ and Baycott, those two are the only two back. We get that as a completely different team. But last year's team missed the NCAA tournament. We're looking to bounce back from this. That's the game last year's team loses by 20 or 25, in my opinion. The shots weren't falling. They were only 40% from the field, 5 of 22 from 3. But they found a way to battle and pull out a win. And it started with that diamond full court press that Hubert pulled out. And Seth Trimble's a big factor in that. Even though it doesn't show on the box score, he brought that energy that forced those turnovers. And with that game, I think it shows you that this Carolina team was going to battle to the end no matter what. And then went on that press ended up going on a 22-0 run, which totally flipped the game. And I think it was a 35-11 run overall. They went from down 14 to up 14. And that completely changed it. And again, like Tennessee, Florida State's bigger. They foul more. And Carolina took advantage of the free throw line. They were 25-31. And when you're shooting 81% from the free throw line, that's really helpful. And again, just like in the Tennessee game, sharing the basketball is key. 24 made baskets and 13 assists off of those. So the turnovers were a little bit higher against Florida State. And that's something that I think Florida State causes problems with from a length standpoint. But overall, it was really nice to see Carolina battle when they got down 14 there early in the second half. And so it was a sleepy out Saturday afternoon. And you expect that. That's a sandwich between two big-time games. You had Tennessee on the front end, and you're looking ahead to UConn. So you had 2 top 10 games, and you have a conference game in the first weekend of December, which we should not be playing conference games this early. But that's
no, not at all.
That's a different argument to make.
Yeah, that's another argument for another day. But again, Florida State's length was something that I felt in the first half really hampered what Carolina wanted to do. Let's remember, you're playing 2 6-foot guards, and 6 foot's being generous for RJ Davis. It can hamper you, especially when your MO is to go to the basket. But I thought that they responded well. I was very happy with the second half. The first half was, and I tweeted on Keeping It Heel, was very disappointing. And there's no two ways about it. I think if you ask any of the players, they'll tell you the same thing. But they found a way to respond, and that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, exactly. That you're not going to – I think the biggest thing with basketball, and people have to understand this, as fans, you want to flip out after every 4-minute segment or 8-minute segment of basketball when you're down 6 after 8 minutes or something. Basketball's 40 minutes. That's a long time of basketball time. In real time, 40 minutes ain't that long. But you got to realize 40 minutes of basketball, a lot can happen. And I think Carolina showed you that on Saturday. In a 5-minute stretch, they went on a 22-0 run in 5 minutes of game time. So a lot can change. I think as fans, we have to step back and realize, hey, let's take a moment and not overreact. Let's view the game as a whole at the end of the game and see what the end product is. And for the course of the season, you're not going to win every game. You're not going to win every 4-minute segment. You're not going to win every half. But if you win more times than you lose, that's the ultimate goal. And I think Carolina's doing a very good job of that early in the season.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think they really are. And, the thing about that is a good team's going to be able to rebound. And that's what they were able to do against Florida State. And you know what? You got to give them a chance to have that bounce back. And I think, like you said, you talked about it with the every 4-minute stretch. I think the media timeouts do a lot with that because I think people see them as mini games and then they panic. Like, oh my God, they went on a 7-0 run here. Okay, but that's one stretch of a 40-minute game. That's right. How you got to look at it. It's one stretch. And if you win 8 of those 10 stretches, you're going to win the game. So you're going to have those times where other teams are going to play And let's remember, college basketball is a game of momentum, and it's a game of runs. You're going to have another team go on a run. It's impossible to shut a team out for an entire game. It's not going to happen. But you have to withstand the storm when that does come. And that's what they did against Florida State. They were down 14. They withstood it. They were able to battle through it. And they did the same against Tennessee. They were up. Tennessee came roaring back. They held them at bay. That's what good teams do. And that's what people don't understand at times, is that they start to panic over small stretches that do happen. And, oh, let's burn a timeout. Burn a timeout. Why would you take a timeout 3 seconds before the media timeout? That makes no sense to me. People are and we'll get to this later, but people in the crowd at Madison Square Garden are like, call a timeout. I'm like, you're 10 seconds away from a media timeout. Why would you give them momentum and call a timeout?
Yeah, I've always, this is a little bit of Ruiz's mindset was in November and December, it doesn't matter as much. Like, let the kids learn for March and let them see if they can figure it out and stop the run on their own without you having to call a timeout. Because in March, okay, fine, yeah, burn the timeout because that's do or die. But it's not do or die in December. Let them grow up a little bit. And this is a team that's still trying to jail. We got to remember, this is just as much as Elliot Cadogan, it's only his ninth game. It's only the ninth game for this team. And it's a team game. And Cormac Ryan's coming off the ankle injuries, and he's been a little cold here of late and things like that. All those pieces will get put together. And when you look at the Tennessee game and the first half they put together, and then you look at the second half and how they held them off, and you look at Florida State, and they held them off from pushing back. Even after the 22-0 run, Florida State was still able to go on a 7-0 run of their own. But those 4-minute segments, like we're talking about, that's only 10% of a game. And so, like you said, win 7 or 8 of those, you're fine. I think you have to look at the bigger picture here. I think a lot of Carolina fans are freaking out over the little things. There are some concerns, and we'll talk about those concerns that were exposed in the UConn game, but I don't think there's anything that we need to be panicking about. I think this is a very good basketball team and has a lot of potential going forward.
Absolutely. And if you're ready to transition over to Madison Square Garden, Tuesday night, let me tell you, Tuesday night felt like an Elite Eight game in terms of the crowd. Yeah, I was there. I was live. I had no voice after. I was smack talking to old couple in front of me. They were very nice. We got along as the game went on, but when you start attacking Armando Bacot, calling him soft, you're going to hear my voice in the background of it. But I got there early, and the reason was, number one, I live in New Jersey, so that's like a 45 to 50-minute trip with traffic. We got there in a great time. I think we got there right at tip-off, and if it wasn't for me connecting with an old friend that I saw, we would have been in our seats for tip-off. But the FAU-Illinois game felt like the opener at a concert. And it's terrible to say because it was a top 25 game, but that place was empty. And it didn't start filling up until about 8 minutes left in the second half. And it's a shame because it was a great game. I watched all of it. You know, I'm a basketball junkie. So for me, I enjoyed it. Terrence Shannon over there with the massive dunk. Him and some other guy, I had no idea who he was, averaged 9 points going into the game, had 66 combined points. It was a great game. But then the atmosphere just changed. The place was packed. There was people all over the place. Carolina Blue, UConn. It felt like a UConn home game. And I would say it was probably like 70-30 in favor of UConn. But it was a fun atmosphere. And for Carolina, that's a great learning experience because, number one, Hubert Davis says it all the time. He wants his guys to play in the Garden. He wants them to experience that. Number two, that was a Elite Eight or Final Four type of atmosphere. That's only going to help them down the stretch, especially given that it was mostly UConn fans. Carolina people travel well. There was a lot of us there. But UConn's only 2 hours away. So they had the band. They had the cheerleaders. They had the mascot who I tried to go down and tackle next to Jay Williams. You know, if I would have gotten thrown out for tackling Jay Williams, it would have been okay. But there was a couple of things that I think UConn did extremely well in exposing Carolina. And I don't know from the broadcast view of it, I want to hear your take on it, but UConn's an elite passing team. And when you're seeing how they move across the court, yeah, they're getting wide open shots, but it's because they're creating the wide open shots. It's nothing. Carolina's not just losing a guy. They're getting pick and roll. They're moving all over the place. I thought they did a solid job of competing with arguably the best team in the country.
It's funny you pointed out the first thing was their elite passing, because that's where I was about to go with that. Is UConn made 34 shots and 25 assists. So only 9 of their made baskets were not offensive assists. That just tells you how great of a passing team they are. They're very crisp in their movements. They run that screen and roll a lot off the ball, and Carolina has started trying to switch that. We've seen it against Tennessee and Florida State. And Kansas tried to do it a little bit against UConn last Friday night. I watched that game just prepping to see what UConn had, and Carolina just didn't have the personnel to be able to consistently switch that. And I don't think that's a knock on Carolina. It's just how good UConn is. And I mean, when they shoot, they hit 10 threes of their own. And I think the next biggest difference was rebounding and UConn's size. And I feel like we're going to talk about size a lot this year with Carolina. And it's more so at the guard position than it is at the forward. But when you have guys that are 6 foot and 6'1", it's hard to hide that size, especially the guards. And Tristan Duden for UConn, he's your guard, but he's your leading scorer, rebounder, and assist guy. And I think that just shows you how versatile UConn is from top to bottom. Their guard is their leading rebounder. And they got Clennigan, who is 7'2", and they got guards out here out rebounding him. So, what Carolina has to do, and great teams find a way to hide their weakness. It's hard to hide a weakness as a physical attribute. And so, how does Carolina hide the weakness of size with RJ and Elliot Cadeau? I think that's to be the ultimate question. I feel like that's what we got out of Tuesday night. But from an overall standpoint, you look at the final score, it's 11-point deficit. I don't think it was that bad. I think it's a lot closer than what we felt. It just felt like Carolina could never get over the hump of that 5-point margin. I think the very last time was 65-60. And Carolina had the ball, or UConn had the ball, Carolina got stopped. The Charles came down, missed a layup, cut it to 3. UConn goes down and misses a shot. Carolina comes down and misses a 3 to cut it to 2. And it just felt like after that, they could never get any closer than 5. And when you go through a stretch, during that stretch, they were 2 of 16 from the field, and UConn pushed that lead back out. When you're in a tight game with an elite opponent, you can't go 2 of 16 in a stretch. You're not going to win that many games doing that. But then you look at the overall picture, and Carolina missed 9 free throws, and they've been a really good free throw shooting team. We just talked about it against Florida State and Tennessee. Missed 9 free throws against UConn. Cormac Brown was 0 of 6 from 3. Baycott didn't have a great night from the field, especially in the second half. He had a knee injury. We found out about afterwards. You put all those pieces together, Cormac just makes 2 or 3 of those threes. You make 6 of those free throws. It's a whole different game against an elite opponent. So I feel like Carolina is right on the doorstep of making that jump to eliteness.
Yeah, there's so many things that you could take from this game. And let's start with Baycott, because I'm going to go on my soapbox once I'm done with talking about Baycott, though. Armando comes out at like the 12:30 mark after he misses the second half of the 1-and-1. He goes to the end of the bench, and he meets with Sean May, which has been a common thing this year. You see May meeting him, and they're talking. But what people didn't realize was that Doug Halverson was working on his knee and lower groin. And I didn't even realize it. I had to go... My mom and sister told me that was the case. And I was like, oh boy, what's going on with him? After that, he wasn't the same. And that was a big turning point, because he had 6 of their first 8. He had 7 in the first 8-minute stretch of the game. And one of the things that I can't stand about Carolina fans, and I'm going to say it, and I think you're going to agree with me on this. I don't understand the hate toward Armando Baycott. I don't. I don't understand it. There's so many people that are calling him soft, and they're saying this and they're saying that about him. This guy has a decorated resume. He is one of the best rebounders in program history, and by number, he is. He's a guy that leaves it all on the floor. If he was a guy that was soft, he would have never came back into that game, nor play the entire rest of that game with no break. He played 35 minutes. I don't understand why they have to find a scapegoat for everything. Caleb Love was the scapegoat last year. Why is Armando the scapegoat this year? Just stop. Let Armando play. The guy leaves it all on the line for Carolina, plays through injuries, plays hurt, and he still had a double-double. It wasn't like he wasn't productive. UConn did a better job collectively rebounding. It wasn't his fault. He did his part. The rest of the team didn't rebound. It can't be on Armando. We can't expect Armando to get every single rebound. As much as we would love it, he cannot get every rebound. Nobody can.
I think you just hit the nail on the head with a key word in that statement about UConn. They rebounded collectively. And Carolina didn't. We got out-rebounded by 10, and it was 43-33. Of our 33 rebounds, Bacot had 13 of them. Almost 40% of our rebounds were from Armando Bacot. How bad is that game for Carolina if Bacot isn't in? Is it a 25-point loss? Maybe. And, yeah, Bacot did not have a great night shooting. He was 4-12. I think we can all recognize that. And it can be a little frustrating when you're missing bunnies at the rim. But you had a 7'2" guy guarding you, and they were doubling Bacot, and he was still trying to make plays. I think my frustration with the Carolina fan base calling Bacot soft, and they just look at the numbers. And on the surface, yeah, you probably look and say, oh, 4, 12, 13 points. It's not a very good night. It's a team game, and that word collectively is so important. And not picking on anybody individually, but Cormac was 0-6. Again, I just said one quarterback makes 3 of those or 2 of those. It's a different game. Jalen Washington comes in, plays only 5 minutes. I didn't think he could handle Flanagan as well as Bacot did. He was 0-2 from the field. RJ Davis was 8 of 17. He's probably the most efficient scorer for the Tar Heels, but not overly great. I just feel like Carolina had a poor shooting night as a team, and it is a team game. And that's what I think the Tar Heel fan base has to understand. Bacot's not going to go 12 of 12 every night. And we have to recognize his improvement from last year. He entered the UConn game shooting 85% from the free throw line. And his career free throw percentage is 66%. He has made a drastic jump on that. He got Flanagan in foul trouble early. He drew a third foul on him very early in the second half. That changed the game for UConn a little bit because it took a little bit of their size away. And that was the biggest difference. But he was one of the 3 guys in double figures for the Tar Heels from Bacot. And just to fight through that knee injury there in the second half. And another key stat line that stands out from the UConn game, Carolina had 3 guys with 5 assists. Bacot was one of them. So he's sharing the basketball and finding guys in open positions. I feel like if Bacot can start sharing the ball, Bacot, Ingram, and Cadeau all have 5 assists. Those 3 guys are finding open players. It's going to make it hard to guard Carolina.
And you got to give Hurley credit because whenever Mondo touched the ball,
he's annoying.
He is annoying. Don't get me wrong. He's an annoying human being. And I'm so glad he was on the other side.
He's a great coach. Annoying to watch.
Great coach. Yeah, he's annoying to watch. But you got to give him credit because every time Armando Bacot touched the ball, there was 2 or 3 defenders on him. He couldn't even pass out.
Immediately.
Yeah, and you have a 7'2" guy already on you. And not to say that he's the greatest athlete in the world, but his size is there and he can pass and he can do the little things. But they were throwing bodies at him and they were beating him up. And then his knees hurt and you're on a foul line. You can't even bend your knee. Like, that's impossible to make a free throw and you can't bend your knees. Like, it's like trying to jump without bending your knees. Like, it's not possible.
One play that stood out to me that defies the logic of Bacot soft is the rebound and the putback where he got the technical foul. He fought through 2 UConn players and on a free throw rebound and got a putback. All in one play or one motion, essentially. And he should never pick up the technical. But that play right there is like, and I believe that was in the second half. That was after he hurt his knee. I'm pretty sure about.
Yeah.
And so he's sitting there fighting through a hurt knee and fights through traffic to get a rebound in a key moment. And then Carolina fans have the audacity to call him soft. I just don't get it. I'd like the Bacot slander to take a back seat for a little bit. And really anybody on this team, I feel like this is a very good team that is gelling well. And I don't feel like anybody on this team, everybody has their flaws. You can sit there and pick apart RJ Davis if you want to and say, oh, he needs to defend better. Well, everybody has a role in this team. And some guys are still trying to figure their role out. We're only 9 games in. Jalen Withers is still trying to figure out what his role is. And Seth Trimble is has figured out what his role is. And Patterson Wojcik and people like that, this team is still trying to gel and figure their roles out. And I think through 9 games, you have to be confident as a Carolina fan where this team can go and what the ceiling is.
Absolutely. And two of the things that I want to touch on as we kind of segue out of the men a little bit. Number one, Cormac Ryan's definitely still hurt. There is no doubt in my mind his ankles are still bothering him, and that's what's impacting his shot. Are some of his shot selections not the best? Yeah, you could say he's rushing shots, but that could be him pressing. But I am not worried about Cormac Ryan. Why? They have 10 days before they go to Kentucky. Well, they play Kentucky in Atlanta. I think that that's going to help him reset a little bit. And like you said, it's the 9th game he's playing with these guys. It's brand new. He'll figure it out. I'm not worried about Cormac. I'm really not. People are worried about him. I'm not. He still brings a high intensity. He's a guy that, you could look at and say, well, you need him on the court. He's a guy like that. And he's going to be a big contributor for this team. The other thing I want to talk about, I made headlines on keeping it heel because I pissed people off. I wasn't trying to. All I was doing, and I'm going to say this, and I'm going to post this on keeping it heel too because I don't want the people to be mad at me. All I was saying was that Hubert Davis didn't use much of the bench. He didn't use it as much as we have seen him use it. And I was just questioning whether or not this was a depth issue. If Hubert was basically telling us that they were short on depth. And again, people were like, why is it always on Hubert? And you can hear, because I've said it to you a bunch of times. I think Hubert's doing a hell of a job this year.
Oh, phenomenal. And the coaching adjustments, I think the UConn game is a great moment where you see Hubert actually, I think the first 2 years you're like, people were questioning, is he even coaching? And I feel like you see it this year. The Florida State game, going to the diamond press, and he didn't wait too late to do that either. He pulled out the diamond press against UConn and caused some issues for the Huskies. The play into the first half to set up a 3-pointer for Harrison Ingram to cut the lead to 5. The 3-pointer against Villanova at the end of the game. He's drawing up plays, and they're legit plays that are making impact. And the guys are responding to that. I'm not as concerned about the bench as I think you might be and the heat that you got from your article. But
the hate, whatever word you want to use for it, Mike.
I do see the concern because when you look at like the Northern Iowa game, you saw 12 guys playing, 11 guys playing, and then you look at UConn and you're like, only 9 guys played, and Washington only played 5 minutes. I feel like Washington still needs to put on some weight and bulk up a lot. And I think that's something that, going back to the Baycott stuff, and everybody wants to hate on Baycott. I don't think you have anybody else you can put there right now. Washington, the drop-off is just too great from Baycott to Washington. Just because of Washington's size, he's not big enough yet or strong enough. I feel that's just part of that development. Jalen Withers, I think, is still trying to figure out his role. And maybe when we see that develop more, maybe Withers gets up in that Seth Trimble range of 15 minutes. If you're 7, 8, 9 deep, I think we're fine. UConn only went 8 deep the other night. Most national championship teams or Final Four contenders are going 8 deep. And you'll see that rotation start to shorten up and tighten up there at the end of the as we get into conference play. So I don't think it's a chance that we're at. I think the Carolina fans need to lay off it's not a Hubert problem. It's just a legit question because we did see it happen 2 years ago with the Iron 5. And then they were exhausted come the national championship. So you don't need 5 guys playing 40 minutes, but I think if you have an 8-minute rotation, I'd like to see Washington get up to that 10-minute mark, Withers in that 10, 12, 15 range mark, and maybe take some of those minutes off of Harrison Ingram playing 38 last night. He played 40 against Arkansas. I know Cormac was hurt that game, but I don't think I'd like to see anybody playing more than 35. But it is a legit question. But I think it's just that question. I don't think it's a knock on Hubert. I don't think it's a knock on this team. It's just a question. And we'll see more as we get into Kentucky in 9 days and Oklahoma in 13 days.
Yeah, I'm not knocking Hubert. I've said it to you before, and I'll say it again. I think Hubert's doing a heck of a job as the head coach right now, and he's gotten so much better at what he's doing. My concern is the wear and tear. And if you go back and if you go back in history and you look at the greats, you look at Tyler Hansbrough, you look at Marcus Page, they didn't average more than 32 minutes a night. So I don't want to see RJ Davis playing 38 minutes. I don't want to see Harrison Ingram playing 38 minutes. I don't want to see Armando Bacot log in a 35-minute night. Give me a rotation of 8 and mix and match with those guys and keep those guys fresh. I'm not telling him to go 15 deep into the bench. That's not possible. And we know that it's not going to happen. But as time goes on, you're going to need those bench guys. And maybe now is the time to define the roles is what I'm saying. Tell Jalen Withers, you're going to play 15 minutes a night, and those 15 minutes got to be the best 15 minutes you could give us. Paxton Wojcik, you're going to play 10 minutes a night, but we need 2 or 3 baskets out of you. Seth Trimble, you're going to play 15 to 20 minutes, and you best believe you got to be the best defensive player on the floor. And that's what I think they need. In order to be an elite team, you have to have everybody being elite in their own role. And that's what I'm asking. Is this a depth issue? Is Hubert worried about playing the bench in big games? Because if that's the problem, this team is not going to go far, especially we were lucky we were not in foul trouble because you really didn't utilize the bench. And, Mondo playing that many minutes with a bad knee, it's a concern.
I think that's part of just Hubert being a young coach. They're still in injury. And if you're looking at it from the standpoint of, I know there's a drop-off between Bacot and Washington. Can I trust Washington against number 5 team in the country? Can he guard Caravan? Can he guard Flanagan for 10 minutes? And if you feel like if you put him in and that lead goes from 5 to 13, then you're digging yourself in a hole where then it's that half you can't sub it all. And I think it's just figuring that out. And I feel like that's why this stretch is good right here. Again, it's December. There's time to figure it out. Roy Williams played with rotations for 15 years at Carolina. And people always look down in December about the rotations. Let him figure it out. Let's have some patience. Let's see where we're at in late January, early February. I think that's where the key is. But this stretch is going to be really telling. I like that Cormac played 24 minutes. I think that Elliot Cadeau range of 27 to 30 is where this team needs to be. But RJ Davis has been phenomenal offensively. I get it feels like you can't take him out because he's been carrying you. This stat was posted on X last night. It's crazy about RJ. I want to share it. He scored at least 25 points and gone 5 or 5 or better from the free throw line in 4 straight games. It's tied for the longest streak by a Division I player this century with Steph Curry.
Stud.
RJ has been phenomenal. And he has some size issues defensively. We know that. And I said before the season, and I'm going to say it again, I'll go to war for RJ Davis. This team will go as RJ Davis goes. And I feel like we're seeing that in real time. We saw it against Tennessee. Saw it against Florida State. He hit some big shots against UConn. Not every shot fell. The whole team had problems shooting against UConn. I feel like RJ is carrying this team offensively, and the support of Elliot Cadeau has been huge for RJ. He's not having to be point guard. He's able to play off the ball and get open shots off screens from Ingram and Bacot. I feel like if we continue to see that development and that growth, this team can go a long way.
RJ Davis is, as Roy Williams would call, a tough little nut. And I have to just say this because it is something that has been on my mind. If RJ Davis was 3 inches taller, he wouldn't be at Carolina right now. He'd be playing in the pros.
He'd be in the NBA with Kobe White.
He'd be in the NBA. I think that looking at his size, we should all be thankful that he's 5'11" or 6 foot because we got to witness RJ Davis grow into an All-American caliber player. And we've seen it in the past, and you can look at Joel Berry and Marcus Page, and the list goes on of guys who played 4 years at Carolina and got better. RJ Davis is making the case to be one of the best scorers we've seen in Carolina Blue in terms of just being able to score the basketball. That's how good RJ has been. And people lose sight of that because, you had a Caleb Love, you have an Armando Bacot. RJ Davis is going to come out of this era here as one of the most beloved Tar Heels. And it's because of what he's been able to do and what he's been able to accomplish. He deserves a lot of credit. for how he's improved over the last 4 years.
Yeah, and you said All-American. I'm thinking if Carolina's have a successful season and make a run, and RJ continues to play like this offensively, these are National Player of the Year numbers. And if Carolina makes a Final Four run or a national championship run with RJ's keeping doing this offensively, he very well will have his jersey in the Raptors at this rate. But again, this team will go as RJ Davis goes. Harrison Ingram might be. There's been a talk of who the best player on the team is. Harrison Ingram is probably the best and does everything well. He rebounds, shares the ball, can score. He plays defense pretty well. But RJ is the offensive catalyst. And I think we've seen that the last 4 games. And saw it against UConn. He carried him against UConn and whatnot. But I really don't want to see RJ and Cadeau off the floor as much as possible without each other. Like, I want those two on the floor as much together as possible.
My only Hubert kind of thing, and I will admit I got a little loud in the crowd at MSG. Please don't take RJ and Harrison out at the same time. You need one of them on the court at all times. Figure it out where you have one of them out there, because when they were that lineup they put out there, I was like, oh my goodness. And then they took Armando out because it was that same stretch, and all 3 of them were on the bench, and I'm like, oh, okay, who's going to score the basketball? Cormac, maybe make one over there, buddy. Come on, let's go. I'm like, oh boy, here we go.
And Cormac's in a cold stretch where you're hearing, and I'm not seeing a ton of this from Carolina fans, but in the past you've seen this where guys are missing shots and you're like, stop shooting. I don't want Cormac to stop shooting. Keep shooting, because eventually one's going to go, and when one goes, then it's a totally changed for him. And he is still battling with the ankle injury. So I am very pleased with this 3-game stretch from Tennessee, Florida State, and UConn. You said it best to me the other night is this is a loss you can live with. And I feel like that sums it up. Is UConn is elite. They are defending national champions for a reason. They are number 5 in the country for a reason. They have size. They score the ball extremely well. They were number 3 in the country in KenPom offensively. And I feel like that was going to be a challenge for the game is Carolina had to figure out a way to play defense against them. And Carolina has struggled defensively. I feel like if there's a knock on this team, that's it. Is how can we figure out to play defense as a team and limit teams offensively? They gave 92 to Tennessee. They did an okay job against Florida State in the second half. But against elite teams are scoring a lot. And I feel like you'll see that going into Kentucky is how, and part of that is the size with RJ and Cadeau. And you gotta have them, you gotta have those guys on the floor for offense. So how do you learn to play with them defensively? And that if there's a knock on this team, that's it. But as a whole, this team is very good. And you come out of the UConn game and come out of this stretch going into these next 2 games before Christmas against Kentucky and Oklahoma, who are both 2 very good top 20 teams. What's next and how do they improve? And this stretch where they have the time off is very telling. And I'm looking forward to it. I'm very excited about this team.
Oh, me too. And if this was last year's team and they would have lost at the Garden, I would have went home. I would have been mad. I was leaving MSG with the little voice I had, and the UConn fans are chanting UConn, and I'm yelling Tar Heels. I was encouraged by it, and it's a loss that I can live with. You know what? It's a game they're going to learn from. They didn't get blown out. They played tough. You know, like you said, Cormac's going to start hitting shots. Hopefully Armando's healthy. We have one of the best guards in the nation in RJ Davis. Cadeau's coming to his own. I love Harrison Ingram. I'll tell you every single time I can have the opportunity to say that. I think this team is going to be fine. And I think that the growth from Hubert Davis as well, they're going to be a tough team to match up with when they get into conference play, because this stretch is going to test them. And that's a great thing. You know, you can live with the losses. You can live with the top 25 duels. But you look for signs of encouragement, and that's what this team has given us.
Yeah, the biggest thing for me is with college basketball. What makes college basketball so great is a loss doesn't kill you. This isn't the college football playoff. A loss isn't going to knock you out. You can learn from it. You can learn and build on this.
Too soon with the loss is going to kill you, buddy.
Yeah, sorry, Florida State. A loss doesn't kill you apparently in the ACC. But
your quarterback getting hurt does.
So, and this game was not as close as the game I'm about to reference. And I'm not trying to signalize this team as anything like the team I'm about to reference. But this game against an elite opponent kind of reminded me of December 2016 when they played Kentucky in Vegas. They lost a close game to the Wildcats. They learned from it, And then you got a rematch with them in a few months later in March, and Luke may hit the shot. We all know what happened next. This game is kind of a game you can build on and learn from a loss, and I'm really looking forward to it. And you mentioned playing in Madison Square Garden is a great experience. I love these neutral site games that Hubert is scheduling. MSG with UConn, Atlanta with Kentucky, Charlotte with Oklahoma. Where are the NCAA tournament games played? Neutral sites. So these are
big stadiums.
And in big stadiums and big arenas. So these are great learning moments for these guys. Some of these guys may have never played in this moment. I think Cormac Ryan's played in one NCAA tournament game or two NCAA tournament games in his life as a 25-year-old kid. So even though he has all the experience, he's not playing in a lot of NCAA tournament arenas or formats. And these neutral sites give you that feeling. You mentioned it. It felt like an Elite Eight game or a Final Four game. These are learning experiences that you can build on for March. And that's the ultimate goal. It's not to beat UConn in December. It's to win in March. And that's the goal. And I feel like this stretch can really help this team.
Have you ever been to Madison Square Garden?
I have never been to MSG.
Okay. So next year, if the Tar Heels fortunately get to play there again, I'm hoping because that's one of my 2 trips. I get to see them every year. You're coming out to the Garden. We're gonna get you that experience. The Garden is a different animal. It is a different animal. It's just, there's no way to describe it. It's just the center of basketball. You're in the middle. Well, not the middle, but you're on the edge of New York City. Everything around you, the traffic all over the place. It's just an experience. And I think that, like you said, those neutral site games are big. They help you grow. They help you learn. And it's something I think that this team, not only are they going to use this year, but I think it's an experience you look back on and you say, you know what? We went to Times Square. We got to see, maybe they got to see the tree, the Christmas tree. You know, those are things that you take from this experience. You're like, okay, that was a cool thing that I could remember for the rest of my life. So it's an experience.
Life experiences.
And the High family is a great example. Because Aiden's mom posted they never saw the Christmas tree during the holiday season. They got to do that. So not only is it something for the student athletes, but it's for their families as well. Like you're playing at the Mecca of basketball. Like that's the first time good basketball has been played in New York City since last year when the Tar Heels were there. So it's just it's an experience. So next year they go to Madison Square Garden. We're getting your behind to New York for the weekend to come see that. Let's talk a little bit about the women's though. The women's team. South Carolina, that was a gritty game. Alyssa, let's be getting into it. You know, showing some fight. Deja Kelly in the middle of. I was like, let's go. Fly me to Chapel Hill. I'm going to throw hands. Like, here we go.
Don't stay out the half court. No technical on her.
I'm afraid of her. Low key, I'm afraid of her.
Because she gets away with everything or just because you're afraid with her?
Because she gets away with everything. But I think, like, if she was in front of me and she started attacking me, I probably would just, like, run away. First of all, I would never hit a woman. That's just first thing for me. But just like cover myself up because I think she could really kick my butt. But they're tough. South Carolina's a tough team.
I was very impressed with how Courtney Bainhart's squad fought against the number 1 team in the country. And I've said it before. I said it before the show or before the game last week. I think South Carolina is better this year than they were last year, and they don't have Aaliyah Boston. And I feel like the Tar Heels did a lot of good things well. The biggest knock is offense and being able to capitalize on opportunities offensively. They were up 10 there in the second quarter. Then they were up 23-13, and they proceeded to miss one of their next 11 shots. And South Carolina didn't score during that stretch. So while the Tar Heels were playing really good defensively, they weren't getting scores. Kind of like in North Carolina, UConn, and the men's side, Carolina was getting stops and not able to put scores together. So it felt like in that stretch, like Carolina could just make 5 or 6 baskets because South Carolina's going to make a run. It's a game of runs. We've talked about it all show. You need that lead as big as possible, especially against really good teams. And it just felt like the Tar Heels couldn't do that. And then South Carolina went on a run and then it kind of like spiraled. But North Carolina did things well, especially defensively. Out-rebounded a really big Gamecock squad, 45-39 on the boards. They held Cardoso to only 6 points, who's South Carolina's big and does a great job. Overall, I think the Tar Heels should be pleased with their performance and a 7-point loss at home in a game they were a 30-point underdog.
Yeah, you know what? And you look at that stretch, they lost 3 in a row, but some of the things that they have to just rectify are things that are fixable. They're not shooting the ball well from 3. That's something that they haven't done well. The defense is playing well, but you know what? If you don't, everything looks better when the ball goes in the basket. We say it every week, but it's the common truth with this team. And they had some spurts against UNC Greensboro. They withheld the storm from them. They were shooting like Steph Curry showed up in the gym. It was incredible again. It's kind of like everybody wants to have a career day in Chapel Hill. But you have to look at this team and say, you know what? First of all, they're not healthy. Deja Kelly's banged up. Paulina Parrish is now banged up. Caleb McPherson's banged up. They haven't had Tony Key yet. You look at this team and, you know, you got a lot of talent, but you haven't been able to put it all together yet. And they'll be able to, hopefully, in the near future. But you know, this team has the pieces. Lexi Donarski had a great game against UNC Greensboro. Alyssa Utsby's playing very well. They said she's coming back for a 5th year. I think that's music to both of our ears. Maria Gogteng, in my opinion, is a top 5 center in the country right now, the way she's playing. Anya Poole's embracing her role as a backup big, and, you know, she's making the most of her minutes. It's just a matter of finding that 5th starter and finding the right mix to get shots in the basket.
I think that's the biggest thing is making shots. And especially when you're playing high quality competition, you have to make shots. And I mean, you look at it across all levels of the sport, you have to make shots. But against South Carolina, the Tar Heels were 4-21 from 3. And that's 19%. And that's not going to win many games. And if you just make 3 of those, you're up 2.
Yeah, exactly. It's a game changer. Free throws too.
Just 7 of 21 from 3 would have been 33%. Just hit 33% of them. And if the shots aren't going from 3, then get closer to the basket. And then free throws, you said it, missed 12 of 17 from the free throw line against South Carolina. Those are shots you have to capitalize on points, especially at the free throw line, to beat really good teams. But I think it's a good challenge for the Tar Heels. I think it's a spot that you can – it's a law – again, kind of like UConn. It's a loss you can live with. And it's a learning experience, and you get healthy and you start making shots. Again, you don't want to be playing your best basketball in November. You want to play your best basketball in March. So just improve over time, develop. And the Tar Heels have another big test this weekend with UConn going up to they're not playing in Stores. They're playing a little bit north of Stores, but it's basically a home game for the Huskies.
So let me just advise our listeners, okay? Jordan is living in a divided household for the next couple of days because his lovely wife is a UConn fan. Now, I'm going to ask you this, and I would be perfectly okay if you lie about it, and you give me a wink like, I don't really believe this. Who do you have winning this game on Sunday?
So, I've watched, I'll be honest, I've watched more UConn women's basketball than I've watched the Tar Heels basketball because we watch UConn every night that they're on here. And she's only a UConn women's fan, so Tuesday night was not a problem in the household. She
likes Carolina, everything else.
Carolina, she's married into Carolina, everything else, just not on the women's basketball side. So, I have Carolina win this game. And I have Carolina win this game because I feel like Carolina and UConn are very similar in a lot of ways. And right now, they're both struggling offensively. UConn is having problems finding out who their scores are. They've lost AZ Flood. Caroline Ducharme is out. No timetable on her return. While the Tar Heels are also struggling offensively, the one thing that Carolina has done really well this far, and they did it really well against South Carolina, that UConn is not, is play defense. And I feel like that is a huge factor. We talked about it in football. Defense can win championships. Defense can win you a lot of games. Texas on Sunday against UConn turned the Huskies over 20 times and scored 32 points off those turnovers. If Carolina can take advantage and do the same thing and force UConn into some mistakes, I think Carolina can win this game. And the ultimate challenge is going to be how you stop Paige Beckers. And I think that's going to be a challenge for Lexi Donarski, who is Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year before she got to Carolina. Comes into Carolina, has been playing really well. So that's been a challenge for her. But I think it's going to be a really competitive game and one that the Tar Heels can win.
Is your wife home by any chance that you're saying that?
She is not home. But she will
That's why he said it.
But if she will watch this, I'll gladly send this to her. We can clip it and tweet it out. I'm totally okay with that. I think Carolina wins this game. I am very excited for this game. Our household is going to be awesome. And this isn't just like a friendly banter. We are both diehards when it comes to everything. So, like, we're going to be battling this weekend, and I am so excited for it. Krista already started last week after they lost to Texas that they need to win more than we do, and trying to make me feel bad about trash talking early. I'm all here for it. I'm excited. I'm ready to go. I think the Tar Heels have a very good chance. We need Deja Kelly to play well. I don't think we can go 4-21 from 3 and win. Need some shots to fall, but defensively, we have the talent, and I think that's going to be the challenge. And Courtney Baynard has shown she's one of the win games, 45-41. And I'm perfectly okay with that. Let's do it.
Listen, you win the game, that's all that matters. But listen, they win this weekend. They beat UConn. Krista has to come on the show because she has to hear it from both of us. Like, that's just how it is. That's just how it is. Like, she has no choice.
I'll slide over. We'll pull up a chair. She can sit right here.
The crowd might think she's Paige Beckers. They look the same. She met Paige Beckers a couple of weeks ago, and they took a picture, and I'm like, they look like they're related.
Yeah, if you didn't know who they were, that you could probably say you could probably pass for sisters. I'd give them that for sure.
Yeah, listen, we'll be like, we have a special guest, Paige Beckers here. Thank you. Where's Gino?
Where's Gino at?
Where's Gino?
UConn just is not. You hear the name UConn and they're that household name. You know, they've won all the national championships. They're all over. They've not won a title in 8 years. But so they're still UConn. They're still UConn in a sense, but they've been struggling with the injuries lately, and that's the biggest thing with them. And they might figure it out. The wheels might click Sunday, and if they do,
it wouldn't be surprising.
If they do, then look out. And we know how opposing players always go off against the Tar Heels, no matter what the sport is. So if Paige goes off for 40 Sunday, I would not be surprised. But based on how the season is going, I feel like this could be a very competitive game. I hope it is. I'm going to be doing a lot of trash talking leading up to the game and during the game. So I'm looking forward to it. What do you think? You think they have a chance?
I think they have a chance. I really do. I think it's going to be a good game, like you said. I think they match up well. Carolina's good defensively. UConn turns the ball over. I think that could be a nice mix. They got to get Maria Gokden going. Get her going, opens up the rest of the floor. And again, can't be terrible from beyond the arc.
I think a key point I have not mentioned is Maria Gokden and the size. And I think that's an area that Carolina can take advantage. UConn has Aaliyah Edwards down low, but other than that, they don't really have a reliable big. And I feel like it's somewhere that Carolina can take advantage. They did a very good job of limiting Cardoso against South Carolina and rebounding. Got to do the same thing against the Huskies on Sunday is take advantage, get Gokden going on a pool. She's been playing really well. You mentioned her. Get that rotation going and take advantage in the paint and rebound the basketball. I think that can be a very key factor on Sunday. I think they're playing Mohegan Sun. Is that right? Yeah. So I think it's like a 3-game event that day.
It's a 3-dayer. It's a 3-gamer, I should say.
Yeah, a triple header at Mohegan Sun, and the Tar Heels are the last event, and it's a 5:00 tip. I'm really looking forward to it.
I am too, and we'll be back next week to talk about it, obviously, and there's going to be a lot of updates. We won't have much men's basketball. We'll preview Kentucky a little bit, but we'll be able to break down the UConn game, and hopefully we'll have a special guest having to concede her team's defeat from there. But as always, that guy is Jordan Falls. I'm Nick Delahanty. This has been another episode of the Talkin Heels podcast. Find us on Spotify and YouTube and Apple Podcasts. And in case you missed it at the beginning of the show, Juan Soto is a New York Yankee. Go Heels.
You can miss the playoffs with him. Go Heels.
It's all right.